Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now I like firearms, I like tools, I like maintenance. Today's video takes all of that and puts it right together as we take a look at a digital torque wrench from the company Vanpo. Now in the course of my channel, I have looked at a number of different maintenance products, all the way from cleaning tools, and in this case, the tools that you need to tech on your equipment to keep it in perfect operating condition. And the thing about firearms, torque wrenches definitely coming into play. With the amount of percussive force and the overall inertia and momentum that comes out of firing right out of the muzzle, well, at the end of the day, if you're not careful with your firearms, you can definitely cause damage. So having a good quality tool like a torque wrench can definitely come into play. So what we're going to do in today's video, I'm going to talk to you about this Vanpo digital torque wrench. I have put it to some reasonable practical use at this point, and I'm starting to develop some impressions. And then beyond that, I'm going to compare it against another torque wrench that I've actually already demonstrated on my channel to kind of see where both of these fall in terms of the overall accuracy, the overall sort of use, and how they might apply. But with that said, I have a whole bunch to do and a whole bunch to share with you. And if you're interested in seeing a little bit more about what I'm about to get into, do me a favor, stay tuned. Now, before we get too far, I would like to say thank you very much to the people at Vanpo who did provide this for review. And so again, as I mentioned, maintenance on firearms is something that's definitely important to me. For the most part, I do like maintenance in general. I'm not necessarily the best, but I kind of take it to heart. I try to do a nice job when I clean my equipment. I try to take care of all my gear to the best of my possible ability. And when it comes to firearms, that can really matter, especially if you're talking about a self-defense weapon. That is something that at the end of the day, you really need to make sure you're taking care of it, you're putting things back together the right way. So when you start to get into some of the modifications or the different sort of maintenance aspects, torque does come into play. Now I'm going to premise this entire video by saying sometimes you can't find the appropriate torque values. There are points in time when the manufacturer does not necessarily report them. Sometimes you can't find the right information online, and even worse, sometimes the information you find online is in conflict with other information. So it does take a little bit of familiarity. It does take the ability to sort of cut through some of the noise and get down to the bottom line. And if there is ever a question, reaching out to a professional is a must. But for the most part, I have been able to navigate my way through this, and having something like a torque wrench has worked out very well. And so now, as we get into the Vanpo digital torque wrench, or I should probably really say digital torque screwdriver. This is a great product. I have definitely come to enjoy this. This torque screwdriver does have a digital display with what Vanpo describes an accuracy of plus or minus 2%. This provides 4 measurement modes, so kilograms, centimeters, newton meters, inch pounds, and foot pounds. This can be used for electronic devices, different machinery equipment, different computer equipment, and precision instruments. In my case, I will definitely be using it for my firearms. This torque screwdriver provides 6 groups of preset modes, and the common torque values can be set in advance. This does have a peak mode, which would automatically record the torque value set after each mode and record the peak value. This does adapt to S2 style bits. It comes with 10 different sizes. When you use the torque wrench to approach the appropriate torque, you can see there will be red and green lights of LEDs that flash, and there will be an audible sound to allow you to understand when you're hitting the maximum values. As you see here, this does go from 2.66 inch pounds all the way to 53.1 inch pounds, or in other words, 0.326 Newton meters, and everything in between. It has a nice LED indicator. The buttons are very easy to use, and for the most part, the programming on this is pretty simple once you get used to it. But here you can see, as I get into some practical use, I did want to get my scope torqued down onto the scope rings. So here's one of the things that's definitely going to be a little bit of an experiment. I could not find the appropriate torque values that I needed for this, so it was just a matter of experiment. So I thought the first thing I would do is just kind of get a feel for it as I was loosening this up. try to figure out the exact bit sizes that I needed and just do a little bit of homework ahead of time. And here you can see as I try to torque this up, just going at the lowest possible setting just to get a feel for it. But at this time, moving it up to 5 inch-pounds, that is definitely a very low torque value overall, and something that I knew I could just start to get a feel for this. Like I mentioned, I did not have any information from the manufacturer. I've never, in practical use, really been torquing up specifically on my rings without doing it finger tight, and at this point, just trying to get a sense for it. But the 5 inch-pounds, definitely making some noise. You can audibly hear it, and that's going to be an indicator of where I stand. Now, it definitely did not feel tight enough, so I figured, well, let's go up to 10. So 10 also not a very high value. Most of the things that I've torqued up on my firearms, much, much higher than that, but I figured 10 would be a good way to go. And so here, again, torquing up, you can hear the audible noise, and this is definitely moving to the point where torquing up on this, it definitely feels about right. This does feel like what I typically get out of a typical screwdriver, so I knew it was going to be about right, and I figured this would be a pretty good place to go for now. Just a start and a place to get some benchmarks. And so there you have it, just a real brief practical application using this Vanpo digital torque wrench. Now again, not perfect, and I sort of had to work my way through that. As I mentioned, there are not necessarily torque values to literally everything you're going to do. But at this point, I've sort of established in my mind a little bit of a benchmark. I didn't over torque. I don't think I under torqued, but I found that sweet spot where it just felt about right, felt about the right sort of overall torque on that screw head, and definitely got my scope mounted in a way that I don't think I'm going to cause damage to the scope. And when I start firing with it, it's not going to move or shift or loosen up. Now, I will caveat all that by saying if you actually look at what I mounted it to, it was to an air rifle. Of course, it's not going to rattle loose. In fact, those scopes I currently use for my Ruger 1022, which is a 22 LR. So that, at the same time, not a lot of recoil, not a lot of hard hit, but the more and more you get into this, and the larger and larger caliber, the stronger and stronger firepower, the more and more torque is going to come into play. So I do urge everybody to pay attention to that and try your best to get good, proper torque on everything you're working on. Now, just briefly, we are going to take a look at this Wheeler Fat Wrench. I have covered this in prior videos. Now, this is not the digital version. There is a digital version by Wheeler, but this one here, just call it basic analog. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this to 18 inch-pounds here. So taking the wheel and dialing this up, there is a little red indicator, and I'm very curious about this. If I go up with the top of the red line to 20, and then just back it down a touch, kind of right in between 15 and 20, that to me is going to be about 18 inch-pounds. Now, so for this example here, taking the Vanpo, turning it on. Here, I'm going to hold up. We're going to go to 18.0. And the cool thing when you look at the digital, as I've mentioned, the ability to literally go to the 100th of the inch-pound. Like, I will never need to be that close or that precise by a long shot. But the fact that it does that is pretty cool. So at this point, as you see here, 18 inch-pounds. You can tell the battery there's just run down a bit. I don't know what happened. I'm not sure if maybe this was left on for a while or something like that, but definitely something to keep into consideration. And you do have the ability to set different sort of memory modes. So I could long press on that, and I could lock that in on my memory 1 if I want, and then call that back. So if this is something I go to on a regular basis, I can definitely call that back with the Vanpo. So pretty cool. And so right now on my Ruger 1022, here you can see this is the takedown model. I have 2 bolts here. We're going to look at the one that is currently on the barrel. So this is on the barrel. And as we take a look at the Wheeler, I'm just going to get the appropriate bit. And just briefly looking at the bits that come with the Vanpo. This here is a 4mm bit, so an H4, so the hex bit 4mm, which they're calling H 4.0. So that does come with this, and this is the size that I need. So as I take the wheeler, we're going to turn this here, definitely moving, and it breaks. So again, the manual or mechanical, take it, turn it, and it breaks. So I know at this point that's roughly about 18. Again, I'm going by the top of the red line, performing the same task with the Vanpo. So as we get it on here and start to turn, it's getting close. It is turning a little bit on me, so it makes me wonder if I had the wheeler set just right, but we'll check this out. So as you see here, there you go. So very indicative of exactly where you are. It's clear, it's obvious, and I like that. And so looking a little bit closer at the wheeler, it makes me wonder if inside the red there is a little line. So I'm going to crank this up just a tiny bit more. That to me looks closer to 18. And it's going to be hard, but at this point, of course, this will break. So now what we're going to do, I'm going to now go back onto the receiver screw. And this I would carry at about 18. So turning the wheeler, and that breaks. Let's see how it feels with the Vanpo. So getting on this again, as you can see. It's not turning at all. And that seems to be just about the exact same torque. So at this point, I think I have actually learned a couple of things, which is nice. Now I can see, the closer I look at the wheeler, that inside the red, there does seem to be an indentation or a line. And I have it more now appropriately set to that 18 inch-pounds, which is literally identical, pretty damn close anyway, to the Vanpo. So I do feel as though these are actually fairly accurate when you really get down to it, and especially if the two of these are matching and getting to that same torque, that makes me feel pretty good. And so even though this doesn't have the largest bit selection, it is going to have some things that are, I would say, fairly common. But if you don't have exactly what you need, there are some really nice bit kits out there. And the one I have chosen to leverage is this nice Titan kit. Got this at an automotive supply store, and it has just about everything I'm going to need in a fairly compact unit. So that actually works out very well, and that's going to make a nice companion accessory to your Vanpo digital torque wrench. And so just a couple last things to consider. This does come with a certification. So any tool that really should come calibrated should have a certificate of calibration, and that's exactly what you have here. Now, of course, all of this is subject to trusting the work. I have no reason not to. It does seem to be legitimate. Everything seems to work very well. So here you can see the inspector for this was Jessica, apparently, and it was stamped with a pass. Now, it does look to me as though that's not necessarily a stamp, but rather a digital stamp. So it's not like this was inked. I think that's a little bit funny, but at the same time, it is there, and it's just something worth noting. I'd be curious to see other units, what the percentage of error is, and really how that plays out. But as I mentioned, this here, at least a certificate of calibration from Vanpo. At the time of this video, this is actually a fairly new unit. So here, May of 2022, so less than a year old for sure. And at that point, at least from what I can tell, this does seem to be reading accurately. So very nice. Now, in terms of putting this away, the last time I used it, I literally just put it back in the case. But here, I should be holding down that C button. So that was my fault. I left this in the case running That is just user error and probably an indication why the battery power is already literally half. But all in all, a very nice tool. So to the people at Vanpo, thank you very much for providing this for review. And to the rest of you, as I mentioned the entire time, firearms maintenance is key. And in fact, that's sort of the nature of life. If you can keep up with your equipment, you can really prolong the overall service life. I don't care if it's your house. I don't care if it's your gear and your outdoor equipment. I don't care if it's your lawn equipment, your vehicle. Anything you can maintain to the highest possible standards is going to prolong the life. It's going to increase the overall performance, and it's going to give you that user satisfaction. And for me, being and I'm not going to necessarily say firearms like enthusiast, but somebody who's getting into firearms, really enjoys it, and just wants my equipment to perform, trust me when I say I'm my own worst enemy with this stuff. I'm already struggling enough to be accurate and precise and consistent. So if my equipment wasn't precise and consistent, it wouldn't be doing me any good. So at least removing some of the variables, getting down to the point where my equipment is properly maintained, keeping it clean, keeping it torqued up, that's going to go a long way. So again, to the people at Vanpo, thank you very much. And so if you like this content, do me a favor, take a look at my Outer Limitless channel, which is more on my primary gear. On that channel, I cover everything from hiking, camping, and backpacking excursions, all the gear that goes with it. So from sleep systems, shelter systems, knives, axes, backpacks, flashlights, you name it, that's my Outer Limitless YouTube channel. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon.